Hey guys, Abby here. How are you guys doing today? Today I have joining with me Dr. Kate Balestrieri. Um, Dr. Kate, did you want to introduce yourself?
Oh, thank you.
Welcome.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on
Sure.
your show. I'm Dr. Kate Balestrieri. I'm a licensed psychologist, certified sex therapist, and the founder of a national therapy practice called Modern Intimacy.
Great, thank you. Well, I appreciate you being here. I'm sure my viewers do as well. Um, I've reached out to you because we get a lot of talk about fetishes and lifestyles and kinks on our channel.
Mhm.
So it's kind of nice to have a professional point of view. Um, I am by no means a professional. I give my personal opinions, my life experiences. So I thought it would be kind of cool to get a professional's take on it. Um, so, like, before we delve into any specific kind of fetish, like, where I wanted to get your thoughts on where do fetishes stem from in a person or kinks? Um,
That's such a good question. I'm going to answer this in a few different ways. So,
okay.
one, sexuality is incredibly diverse, and we sex therapists tend to look at sexual fantasies and activities on a spectrum. And for a long time in the sort of common culture and the heteronormative sort of compulsory monogamy culture, the acceptable sexual behaviors, and I am putting that word in big air quotes, acceptable,
Hmm.
have been really narrow and really limited. So, what we understand about that is that sexuality is actually a hugely diverse continuum of experiences, and people are born with different interests, different sensory needs for pleasure, and also based on sort of their environment and how they're raised. Different
Hmm.
themes, different ideas may become more centralized in their arousal template or in their erotic orientation. And that can really shape things like kinks or fetishes later in life that they may be interested in. So I think
Hmm.
it's a little bit of nurture and nature, and certainly nature via nurture for a lot of folks.
Gotcha. Gotcha.
Mhm.
Well, thank you for that. Um, as we had chatted a little bit before we started recording this, um, my channel started out as a smoking fetish channel, and we have kind of, as people wrote in and asked questions, we've kind of like spun out into a whole slew of fetishes. Um, so, like with the smoking fetish, my point of view, my belief is sort of a Freud's idea of, Oedipus complex. I see you smiling. Oedipus complex sort of thing, and the cigarette being a phallic symbol. Um, and later in life, that surfaces as some type of fetish or kink. Um, would you agree with that,
Yeah, I
or
think
what is your point of view?
well, Freud had a lot of interesting ideas, and some of them we can put a little weight on, and some of them are maybe left in Freud's time, better left
Hmm.
in Freud's time.
Yeah.
But yeah, for some people, certainly a smoking fetish could be related to a fixation on the phallic. It could also, if we're going to talk about Freudian theories, could be about trust, because anything oral in Freud's psychosexual stages is really around the development and the testing of trust. So for some folks, it may be for about either of those things. For other people, it might actually indicate a fixation on lips or a fixation on the idea of sucking or inhaling, being full with air, or exhaling something. Could also represent desires or ideas about subversiveness, as we know more about the perils of smoking on people's health collectively.
Hmm.
For some people, it might represent kind of a rebellion to what they're supposed to like or supposed to do.
Got it.
So it can have different manifestations and representations for different people.
Okay. Okay. Well, thank you for that information. That's a lot more information than what I have always thought, and I appreciate that. That kind of gives me a new perspective on things, on the smoking fetish for sure. Um, so moving on to two of the most popular fetishes, kinks, um, that I get lots of stories about, lots of questions about, is cuckolding and swinging.
Mm.
Um, and I just wonder what your take on it is, and how do these how does this type of a fetish or kink come to be? Because I have certain perspectives and theories as well, and getting a professional opinion would be great.
Uh, well, I don't know that I would consider swinging a kink per se. I might consider that a type of relationship orientation.
Okay.
But people can incorporate a lot of different kinds of kinks or fetishes into their swinging activities. So it's
Hmm.
kind of a yes and conceptualization. But when we're talking about cuckolding, and we could have a whole episode about cuckolding, I
Right.
think it's important to recognize that there are a lot of people who play in the cuckolding space, but another iteration of cuckolding is called hot wife fantasy or hot
Hmm.
wifing. So these are similar, but have different motivations and meanings for people. So for a lot of folks who enjoy cuckolding, there is an element of power dynamic that is played out here. Um, and it often takes shape in the form of the cuck experiencing some kind of humiliation or power in a one down position. So that can look like a lot of different things. And every partnership can construct a cuckolding dynamic in any way that works for them. But for many people, it involves a cuckold being in the room and watching and not being able to participate, or having restrictions on how they can participate in their partner's sexual play with another person. This is
Hmm.
often played out in heterosexual dynamics, with a cuck being a man and the woman sort of being very empowered to be sexual with whomever she wants in a way that she wants, and in a way that's more satisfying than
Hmm.
her sexual dynamic with her cuck partner. So for all people involved, there's a lot of erotic charge around him being humiliated in this way. Now, a lot
Hmm.
of people, especially men, will ask me, why would anyone want to do that? It's so
Hmm.
humiliating. And
Yeah.
the thing is, there aren't a lot of safe spaces for men to play with emotions and experience emotions like shame or being powerless or being humiliated. And so, for a
Hmm.
lot of men who like those kinds of dynamics, what they're really appreciating is that it's a place where they can experience those feelings in a contained way. They often have a lot of processing and care and debriefing that happens with their partner afterward that
Hmm.
serves as like a bit of a reclaiming or a rejoining. So kink at its core is less about sex and it's more about intimacy. And for
Hmm.
people who appreciate cuckolding, there is an intimate play that allows them to build a stronger emotional connection more often than not,
Hmm.
by playing with these power dynamics.
Yeah, I would agree there. That's very interesting, um, because that was a question, and I'm glad you mentioned about the cuckolding and the hot wifing, um, and the difference between the two. I have mentioned that before on my channel,
Mhm.
um, and I have to say that I I personally, for the longest time, my husband and I, we engaged what I thought was cuckolding. Now I know a lot of these kinks and lifestyles have different little nuances that people make that make it their own. And I just kind of thought that that was where we were. This was because we didn't involve the humiliation part. That
Mm,
has never been a part of our dynamic.
mhm,
Um, and in the beginning, the very beginning, I was very reluctant. Um, I thought, oh my gosh, this is the beginning of the end of our relationship. Um, where did I go wrong? Like all these thoughts just started going through my head. And I was very, very surprised to see, and I'm glad you mentioned it as well, that it afterwards, I felt like we had a much deeper connection. Uh, our love for each other just reached a whole new level that I never thought possible.
mhm,
Um, and our relationship is better and closer for it,
mhm,
much to my surprise.
mm.
So I'm glad you can kind of confirm that because I say that quite often when we're talking on that subject. So it's nice to hear it from a professional side too, I guess.
Oh, I appreciate
um,
you sharing your experience, though. I think a lot of people really have fears about what does this mean about us if we want this or like this together, but it really can be super joining and super connecting for partners.
yes, yes, very much so. Um, and I did have a question too with regards to that. Do you think that cuckolding and swinging type lifestyles are becoming more popular? Or is it just a matter of it's become people are more open with talking about it? Um, and it's always been hush hush up until recent years.
That's a
Um,
It's a good question. I don't have an answer for you on that because I think it has been far more prevalent than people have been willing to
mhm,
talk about for a long time. And it's really hard to say about whether or not people are being more open to it because more folks are talking about it and because on social
mhm,
media it's something more people have exposure to. I think we could certainly make an argument for um,
mhm.
the likelihood that because of YouTube channels and podcasts and social media and people
Right.
writing about it online, we do have more exposure to
Mhm.
things that are under the non-monogamy umbrella or also under a kinky umbrella that gives people a lot more normalization of those
Mhm.
behaviors. So they may be more inclined to step into that lifestyle and do some experimentation, whereas perhaps before they may not have felt so normalized in it.
Okay. That's fair. I would agree with that as well. I think it's because it, like you said, there's just it's so prevalent and it's so easy to find information.
Mhm.
It's, right there at our hands. I think that it's always been there. It's a lot easier to find and it's not as hush hush as it used to be. Um,
Mhm.
uh, do you think it's become more acceptable to people?
Well, I think there will always be people who are very open about their fantasies and they don't shame themselves and they don't shame other people. And then I think there are always going to be groups of people who are incredibly sex negative and very rigid and will not only police their own sexual behavior, but will police and shame other people for behavior they deem inappropriate. So I think that tension is probably going to
Mhm.
be a part of human behavior because of the ways that we have overcoupled sex with politics and with religion and with social currency in the world.
Uh-huh.
Um, but surprisingly, well, perhaps not so surprisingly, people who identify as being more conservative tend to have higher tendencies to align with these kinds of fantasies. So we could surmise that where there is repression, there is also greater potential for people to lean into that or be curious about it or want to explore the
Mhm.
taboo. Um, But I think that, for a lot of people, there's an incongruence between what they're doing in their lives and what they say is appropriate because of that sex negativity and the social currency that hangs in the balance.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think that's very true. Um, just when we had started to engage in this lifestyle, um, and got to know people, and it, I felt like I was some part of some underground society that, you sneak in the back door and, it's hush hush. And if I see you in public, I don't know you, sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it was more far spread than I had ever thought or
Mm-hmm.
knew,
Mm-hmm.
actually. So, but yeah. Um,
And I think the taboo of it, that shame actually, is a part of the erotic charge for a lot of people.
mhm,
So it might get in the way of them living a more integrated, transparent life, meaning
mhm,
it may not be as exciting if they were more open about it. Because for some people, doing the thing that they're not supposed to do and getting away with it is
right,
that really turns them on and gives them
right,
that sort of hit.
right. That thrill.
Hmm.
Yeah. Um, do you think that like people had and have you had people come to you that have had like trouble in their relationships and turned to cuckolding or swinging as a an option to mend or open up or um repair, so to speak, a relationship or
Yeah, of course. I mean, there are a lot of people who find themselves in long-term relationships and they're sort of living in a perpetual state of comfort, but a lack of contentment, right? And so there's a tension there
mhm,
for them. And sometimes what they are looking for is some novelty or some sort of air to be breathed into their erotic
yeah,
life. And this can be a way that couples create more expansiveness in their sex lives together. And when people approach it with transparency and honesty and a non judgmental position with one another, it can be a really beautiful addition to their lives emotionally, relationally, and sexually. What
mhm,
can be really tricky is when people are undereducated about this and they
mhm,
kind of like bulldoze into the lifestyle and they don't know what they don't know. Um,
mhm,
and so they can have a lot of things backfire or a lot of problems in their relationship will suddenly
right,
bubble up to the surface because this new activity and this new behavior, kind of
mhm,
caught them off guard. And so
right,
it can be tricky for people who maybe are rushing the process or
mhm,
are using it to repair from infidelity. I see that sometimes too.
okay,
Um, and that can be a really dicey scenario. So,
mhm,
I mean, for people who are thinking of exploring, I would say do a lot of research together and on your own. Like, think
mhm,
about your limits, your interests.
mhm,
What's it saying for you about this? What are you hoping it's going to do for your relationship? And what if it doesn't do that thing? How will you feel about it then?
right. Yeah, all great pieces of advice. I know some of those things I have mentioned before as well in other videos. Um, but yeah, I wholeheartedly agree with the do your research.
Mhm.
Um, no reason to go from 0 to 60 right out the gate. And definitely take your time, explore, do it in little stages if you need to, Um, yeah, I think that's some great information, and I totally agree with you there. Um, now, do you think most people that are in this lifestyle, kink, what have you, um, do you think that majority of them look at it as a way to um, enhance their sex life, or more people tend to live it as a way of life inside and outside of the bedroom? Um,
Are you talking more about cuckolding and hot wife fantasies, or are you talking more about swinging, or both?
both, either or. I know how mm, I view it and my husband views it. Um, for us, it's a little spice every now and then. It's not like we live this lifestyle from day to day.
Mhm.
And I know there are people out there that do that. Um, do you think that that's healthy to be like that, or um,
Yeah, it can be,
to
right?
do it?
Like, yeah, let's consider relationship orientations, right? For most
Hmm.
people, they've been told that monogamy is the only relationship option. But in
Right.
fact, human beings exist on a really broad spectrum and continuum of relationship orientation, ranging from a healthy and preferred way to be, including monogamy.
Hmm.
And on the other side of that continuum, we might look at a relationship anarchy formula,
Hmm.
which basically says like no relationship is prioritized over any other relationship, right? So
Right.
sexual and romantic relationships get the same priority in people's lives as platonic relationships, familial relationships. And so, what's healthy for one person or two people or three people may
Hmm.
be not really all that awesome or aligned for someone else.
Hmm.
So it's important to respect the diversity of relationship needs and orientations because for some people, monogamy is the only way that they can feel safe and fully expressed in their romantic and sexual lives. And for other people, they feel really limited by that. And so
Hmm.
it's okay to have different needs and to find people whose needs align with yours.
Okay. Great. That's great. That's great advice. I have to ask you what your opinion is on this because I had mentioned about living it as your lifestyle.
Mm,
I did have a viewer once upon a time email me this entire like ceremony, like a cuckolding ceremony that they had laid out, um, and that they were going to engage in, and it and have a party and a celebration and a reception just like you would a wedding.
yeah.
Um, and I thought that was quite unique
Mm,
in what they had sent. I mean, they had it down to exchanging of rings with
mm,
their bowl and
mm.
taking vows and things of that nature. And I was really taken back that um, they had thought this through so detailed. And they moved forward with it and had their ceremony. And I did actually have quite a few people write into me asking for the example that he had sent to me,
Mhm.
um, and have said since that they have engaged in this ceremony and this is kind of how they live their lives now. And I thought it was rather interesting that it was taken to that level.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I thought that was pretty neat when they sent that to me. Very
Yeah,
unique.
it sounds really cool. It sounds really well thought out and very intentional, right? To respect the needs and the fantasies of all the people involved. I mean, it almost
Absolutely.
sounds a little bit like a throuple dynamic, right? So
Hmm.
a non-monogamous um, dynamic that also has a kink overlay of cuckolding. And that can be really healthy for people who want to create that dynamic as a more consistent way that they live. Not
Right.
everyone wants to do that, right? Some
Hmm.
folks, um, well, sex therapists might consider cuckolding play and swinging as more monogamish behavior
Hmm.
because it really serves to amplify the sex life of otherwise monogamous partners. Um,
Hmm.
and they're playing with each other with other people. So, in that
Right.
way, it can be seen as sort of an extension or an expansion of monogamy and not really
Hmm.
true non monogamy. But as you continue down the continuum, some people do prefer a more non monogamous, dynamic. And so that might involve a lifestyle of having one bull who is part of a throuple with that couple, or it might include other bulls who are new to the dynamic and kind of rotate through. So I think it's really up to everybody to decide what feels best for them, and also to
Right.
hold space for debriefing and making adjustments, because sometimes people think something's going to be really great and then they do it and they're like, oh, actually, I think maybe in hindsight this would be better or that
Yeah.
would be better. So, give yourself some
Yeah.
grace as you're figuring out what you like.
Right. Um, so I had one of the things I had someone ask me was, what do you do if you get into a situation like this? And obviously, you can't, it's one of those scenarios or situations where you can't prepare for everything.
Mhm.
You can't prepare yourself for what you're going to feel, what you're going to see in that moment. There's no possible way, there's just too many factors involved. Um, what would you suggest if someone found themselves in the middle of that, a situation like that, and all of a sudden, this is something they don't like, or this
Mhm.
is something they don't want?
Mhm.
What would you suggest they do in a situation like that?
Yeah. Well, I really appreciate you bringing up the reality that there are going to be things that you didn't anticipate feeling when you
Right.
start leaning into this kind of play. I usually, when I'm working with partners, help them create a couple of things. One, a scale of distress to consider, so that they can practice the art of self regulation when something is uncomfortable, but they also know what the limit is to that discomfort and they've agreed upon it. Because what can
Mhm.
happen is, one partner, and it is often the cuck or the stag, if we're talking about a
Mhm.
hot wife dynamic, who is experiencing a range of intense emotions as he
Mhm.
watches his partner, have pleasure with someone else. And that those emotions can be anything from compersion and adoration and appreciation and respect to jealousy and insecurity, shame, unwanted shame, I will specify, feelings of inadequacy that are unwanted or beyond the scope of what they expected to feel. I've
Mhm.
worked with some folks who report feeling nauseous, like they were going to throw up. It just
Wow.
the intensity of all the emotions that they're experiencing. So
Mhm.
it's really important to have both partners agree, like, okay, we can tolerate the feelings that we're having if they are wonderful or uncomfortable, whatever they might be, up to
Mhm.
this point. And if it reaches this point, here's how we're going to tap out with each other. Here's our safe word or our safe gesture. Here's how we know we're not okay to move on. We have to pause and either reconnect, regroup, reevaluate, or stop altogether. Right. So I think
Right.
it's really important to recognize, especially for people who are just getting started in the making this a reality, recognize
Mhm.
that there are probably going to be a lot of big feelings for all partners involved. So that's really, really key. And definitely go slow, have incremental experiences. Maybe the partner who's going to be sexual with someone else goes to dinner with them first. For some
Mhm.
partners, that might feel like a really good introduction to this experiment. And then she comes back, and there's a reclaiming and a joining and a debriefing that sort of allows a graduated integration of these feelings with each increase of
Mhm.
intensity. Some people don't want that. They might say, that's too much emotional intimacy. We just want to have sex. And that's okay too, right? So just talk
Mhm.
with each other to figure out what you both might need as you consider taking steps forward together.
Right. Yeah, that's definitely, yeah, I can see where uneasy situations could arise. You
Mm,
know, especially when people think this is what I want, this
Mhm.
is what I need, and then it happens and you're just like, oh my goodness, no, this isn't what I want, this isn't what I need, and how do I get out of this situation? So I think having a safe word or some sort of, limit discussed
Mhm.
prior to definitely is some great advice. And yeah, definitely something that should be done. Another key thing that I truly believe, um, when it comes to a situation like that, because it can be a very delicate situation, especially when you're new to it, is being open and honest, being transparent.
Yes.
Don't do the keeping secrets
Mm.
or, sneaking around, because then there becomes doubt and mistrust and all these negative emotions that are attached to it. And next thing you know, your relationship is in trouble. And where do
Yeah.
you go from there?
Yeah. Yeah, right. All of a sudden it starts feeling like betrayal and less like a bonding opportunity when there are secrets being kept or when you're not clear together on what you need in order to feel safe in this experience. And you may not know exactly what you need right at the start. So, as I said before, give yourself and give your partner some grace. Each of you are having your own experience in addition to
Mhm.
the shared experience that you're having together. So, there's a lot to manage and there's a lot to process. Because the partner who's experiencing the pleasure with someone else, with a bull in this example,
Mhm.
may be really enjoying that and may legitimately feel more satisfied than the sex that she has with her partner. And that can
Right.
evoke some guilt and some fear and questions about, are we really a good fit? And I think those questions are
Right.
natural and can be
Mhm.
worked through together. Um, and for a lot of partners, it gives them a lot of insight into how can we be better lovers together. So I think when
Right.
you look at the big feelings as opportunities for information and how you can communicate better and enrich your relationship, it can be really meaningful. But definitely if you don't know how to process your feelings or you don't feel safe going to your partner with them,
Mhm.
it can really, create a lot of divide and tension in a partnership.
Yeah, that's understandable. That I think, like in the beginning, that was my biggest fear. It
Mhm.
really, really was that, like, I'm agreeing to this, but it's the beginning of the end.
Mhm.
Um, so yeah, I could see where that would be, and you really, truly cannot plan for everything.
No, you
You
can't.
just can't.
Mm.
Um, but last thing I wanted to ask you, and I get asked this a lot, so I'd like your professional opinion. If someone approached you and said, I'm thinking about asking my partner to engage in a cuckolding or a hot wife, uh, you know, situation, how do I approach them and
Yeah.
ask them, for fear that they may be not be on board, or that may turn them away or turn them off
Mhm.
completely and cause trouble, whereas it was just an inquiry as to
Mm.
whether it was something they'd like or not.
Yeah, well, it's a great question and one that I get a lot for sure as well. It's vulnerable to talk with your partner about trying new sexual things and exploring new sexual fantasies. So I think there's a couple of things to keep in mind when you bridge that conversation. One, set yourselves up for success. So I would not start this conversation in the middle of a sexual experience. And
Mhm.
definitely would not start this conversation when you're like rushing to get to work in the morning, or if one of you has had a
Yeah.
really bad day, if your partner's exhausted. I wouldn't dump this in their lap at the same time. So, it's a good opportunity to say to your partner, hey, I've been thinking a lot about our sex life, and I'd love to take some time for us to talk about it. Like, get on the same page. What do we like? Where do we want to grow together? Where don't we want to go together? Um,
Right,
what's a good time for you to have that conversation? Are you open to
right.
it? And
Sure.
see, you know, when can the two of you be collaborative from the start? And if you approach it in a way that is more open and more curious, like, have you ever heard about cuckolding? Have you ever heard about hot wife fantasies? What do you know about that?
Mhm,
I was reading this or reading an article, or I was listening to this podcast. You can blame
mhm.
Dr. Kate. Say you heard it on my show. It's I was listening to this show and they were talking about this, and I was really surprised at how curious I was about it. Have you ever thought about that? What do you think about it? I wouldn't run up to your partner and say, I'd like to do this tomorrow or Friday night, so get ready. You know, that's intense and
Right,
it doesn't give your partner a lot of time to really process with a lot of nuance and curiosity.
right,
Yeah.
right. That is perfect. That is a great way to handle that situation. Definitely ease your way in little by little. Um,
And be careful that your
but
enthusiasm doesn't show up as entitlement. Right.
very true, very true. Well, Dr. Kate, that is all the questions I have for you. Did you have any additional information with regards to these lifestyles
Mm.
and kinks that you'd like to give?
You've really hit everything that I would have said. Your questions are so awesome and so informed. Maybe just
Thank
the last thing
you.
I would offer to your audience is, like, don't beat yourself up if you like something and your partner doesn't, or your partner likes something and you don't. It doesn't necessarily mean that your relationship is in trouble. People have diverse fantasies and diverse ideas and experiences all the time, and they have really strong, healthy relationships. So, even if there's a mismatch, and you don't have to go along with everything your partner wants or says, and they don't have to go along with everything you want or say. But you know, if there's a mismatch, just know that there are ways to find commonalities that you can explore together, even if it's not exactly what you'd hoped.
Perfect. Perfect. Yep. We all have our thing that does it for us. That's for sure.
Exactly.
Dr. Kate, thank you so much for doing this with me and joining me today. I really appreciate you being here. Everyone, be sure to go to Dr. Kate Balestrieri's YouTube channel and subscribe. She has lots more cuckolding information there. A great channel. And Dr. Kate, thank you again for being with us today.
Mm.
Did you have any other social medias that you'd like to promote or
Um,
anything at
thank
this point?
Yeah, thank you. And thank you for having me on your show. This is such a fun conversation, and I hope it's helpful for your
Absolutely.
listeners. Probably the best place to go to reach out if you want to work with me or someone on my team is modernintimacy.com, our website. And our YouTube channel is at Modern Intimacy. And you can follow me on TikTok and Instagram at Dr. Kate Balestrieri, or you can listen to my podcast, Get Naked with Dr. Kate, on all your favorite platforms.
Great, thank you. And I will put those sites in the description of the video so you don't have to rush to jot it down or try to remember. It will be there for you all. That is all we have for you guys today. Dr. Kate, thank you again. And up until next time, everyone.